all systems that are produced by thought are bureaucracies, in essence. And it's helpful to see this because we know what bureaucracies are. We know what it's like to tangle with a bureaucracy. We know it well. We've been exposed and brought up to live our lives according to bureaucracies. We know what that feels like. And we don't realize that every system that thought produces is a bureaucracy. If we did, we'd be better off. We'd be immensely better off. We'd know what we're dealing with. And for the most part, we don't know what we're dealing with. For the most part, we're cursed with a kind of frightening naivety with regard to thought and its activities. So, what is the essence of bureaucracy? And to be most succinct about it, we could simply say that bureaucracies, by their very nature, are terribly barren, terribly sterile, and actually anti-life when it comes down to it. They're not anti-life in the nature of some terrible demon or vampire or monster that jumps out at you and wants to devour you. Because that would be straightforward, that would be honest. Bureaucracies have a cover story, and the cover story of all bureaucracies are that they're there to help us, that it's necessary to submit to them for the greater good, and that we are very morally irresponsible and foolish and stubborn and headstrong if we don't submit to them. That's the whole thing about bureaucracies. And so, whilst we know that they're crap and we complain about them and often get completely despairing of bureaucracies, we will bow down and submit to them. And whilst it is true in one kind of a way that bureaucracies were originally fashioned or put in place to be of benefit to us, the thing about it is, as I suppose we all know, is that when they get entrenched, they're not really. They're frighteningly inhumane. And the reason for that is that bureaucracies don't recognize anything other than the parameters that they are dealing with. They don't recognize really what it is to be a human being, what humanity is. They're incapable of recognizing that because they are machine-like things. Machine-like things, by their very nature, cannot have any great respect for or sensitivity to our humanity. And that's fair enough. It wouldn't be right of us to expect that they would do. So if I'm raking the garden, I can't really expect the rake to have a deep and abiding respect for what it means to be a human being. It's a bloody rake, for God's sake. I'd be some kind of idiot if I was requiring this sensitivity from a rake. So the difference between a bureaucracy and a rake, or a spade, or a screwdriver, or a dishwasher, is that the bureaucracy is a total system. It replaces the world and it becomes the world, and there's nothing outside of it, and there's no higher authority than it. So when we do that, we're in trouble. We've done the thing that we ought not never to have done. We've let the machine take over. We've let the machine create a world for us, which is a machine world. And then, even though the machine is ostensibly there to benefit us, this benefit is dangled in front of us like a carrot. But before we reach it, we have to jump through all the mechanical hoops and adapt ourselves to the machine. And this process of adapting ourselves to the machine means adapting ourselves to something which has absolutely no care for what it means to be human. It has no concept of that. And as I've just said, it can't be expected to. So we dehumanize ourselves, really. And there's supposed to be some ultimate benefit at the end of it, but they can't be. Because when you're dehumanized and turned into creatures of the machine, there's no benefit anywhere. We wouldn't recognize a benefit if it came up and slapped us in the face. Because we've lost the capacity to recognize what benefit is anymore, or what the goodness is, or what mental health is. We no longer know. We only know the machine's terms for that, which is a kind of analog. So we know a machine analog for happiness. We know the machine analog for mental health. We know the machine analog for peace of mind, and the machine analog for life. And we are now incapable of going beyond those analogs, so we're trapped in the analogs. And the analogs are sterile, which is to say they're mere appearances with nothing behind them. And another way of talking about bureaucracies would be to say that they create an environment that is lacking in any subtlety, in any flavour, any depth. And that's not great. We can all imagine what it's like to be eating food that has absolutely no flavour, that's super bland. We'd complain, we'd walk out the restaurant, we'd take the produce back to the supermarket. It defeats the object. There's no good in the food, even though I guess it could keep us alive, but it would keep us alive in a purely mechanical way. There's more to eating than just keeping us alive. In a way, I suppose you could say, if you wanted to be fancy about it, eating is a celebration of life. It's not merely a functional thing. It's one of those things whereby we appreciate life. Possibly if we're food orientated, it may be some other thing that we are orientated towards. So if the food is merely mechanical stuff with no nuances, completely bland, even though it keeps us alive, it's a travesty. So we all know that, and we'd be soon to complain if we were served food that had absolutely no taste to it. But we're served life with absolutely no taste to it, and we don't complain. And that's obviously, it's even worse. But there is no way that a system or structure that comes out of thought can ever be anything other than completely tasteless, completely bland. So here we are in this bland world, or this blank world, and we're incapable of directly seeing that. I don't think we're capable of directly seeing it. Most people would disagree. and say, no, that's pure nonsense. We're not living in a planned world. And it's not that the world itself, the natural world, is planned, but we don't have that much to do with the natural world. We've created our own world, which is made up of products of our thought, which is what David Bohm means when he says that the system of thought isn't just the thinking mind, it's everything that comes out of the thinking mind. So we just have to look around us to see all the stuff that comes out of the thinking mind. Loads of things, everything we see around us, unless we happen to be living in the countryside or by the ocean. And even if we are, we're probably not spending much of our lives contemplating nature. We're interacting with the mechanical world that we have created. That's what we do. Now, ostensibly, the designed world is there to help us. And when it started off, the modifications that we made to the environment in order to benefit us and help us, like putting a roof over our head, having a fire to keep ourselves warm, etc., really did benefit us. I'm sure they did. Obviously they did. But the point that I'm making is when this goes on and rolls on until what was good in its place becomes a whole world, and we've designed the whole world, and we're not really interested in what we haven't designed. Then we have got too clever for our own good. We've trapped ourselves in our own device at that point. And there's no way that this can be avoided. There's no way that we can avoid seeing that this is the case. Of course it's the case. This is what we've done. We've trapped ourselves in our own device, this world that we live in, the concepts that are meaningful to us, the stuff that comes into our head that we spend our time turning over and over and over, all the stuff that comes into our head, it's all construct. It's all stuff that we've made ourselves. And we don't tend to see that everything that comes out of the mind is blank. We really don't tend to see that, because there's a type of sophistication to it, or a type of glamour that attaches to it. So it's like technology. It's always reinventing itself, and each time it reinvents itself, there's this kind of mystique to it. There's this type of glamour to it, and the glamour isn't the same as depth or flavour. The glamour really comes from the way in which something else is promised or hinted at, without directly being promised or directly being hinted at. But there is the promise there of something fabulous. And the promise is always fresh, and when it stops being fresh, there's another promise. And so we get sucked into this designed world in exactly the same way. We get sucked into the world of products. And it is the same thing, really. So the world of consumerism constantly reinvents itself. It's always new improved, and we're always trying to race to keep up with the new improved. There'll be queues a mile long for the new whatever it is, the new iPhone, the new this, the new that. And a bit later it'll be replaced and we'll have to queue for that. Now that is kind of a cliche, and we've all heard it before, and it's like, yeah, okay. But we don't really see what that means. What it means is we've created a world for ourselves which doesn't have the depth to sustain our interest in it as it is, but only in the fact that some new improved form of it is going to come along quickly before we get to discover that where we are is actually sterile. So that is essentially the trick of the thought-created world. We can never sit still and appreciate where we are, because there is nothing there to appreciate. There really isn't. It's bare. There's no depth to it. There's nothing there other than what is stated as being there. There's nothing there other than what has been written into it or designed into it. It just is exactly what it is. It is exactly what it says on the label, and that's sterile. All the productions of thought have to be sterile, because thought operates by definitions. Everything that thought produces is a defined thing, as I was saying yesterday. And if it's a designed thing, then it is what it is, and it can't ever be anything else, and it is what it is, and there's nothing behind it. This is the world of literalism. And literalism is the literal world is a sterile world, super sterile. So we can contrast this with the world that was not created by thought. And we could say that the world which is not created, has not been created by thought, is undefined. It isn't anything specifically. It isn't a stated thing. What it is an unstated thing, that although it might appear to be something, when we look into it, we realize that there's more to it than we thought there was. And when we look into that, there's more to that than we thought there was. So it isn't a defined thing. We could say it isn't a thing at all, because things don't have this property of opening up and disclosing more and more as we look at them closer. It's like a TV screen. When we look at it and we resolve, we really tune into it, we see the pixels, and that's it. That's the final frontier, is the pixels. Now we can have all sorts of entertainment coming from the pixels, but when we look closely at it, there's just the old pixels, and they're not that entertaining. You know, there's only however many of them are. I'm not sure how many there are, but there's not very many, and that's all it is. It's just these few basic pixels. So there's a finite world, a world that doesn't open up, a world that is what it says it is on the label. And anything that might seem to happen, anything that might seem to come to pass, any adventures that we might seem to have, they're all just these same few pixels. So that explains, in a kind of analogy, exactly what the mind-created world is. Appearances might be exciting appearances, but we never go beyond the basic assumptions, these basic things that are making up the world. So that's a very great difference between the mind-created world and the world which hasn't been created by mind. Because when we delve, as I've just said, when we delve into the world that hasn't been created by mind, it's not like we run into a brick wall of pixels. There's no brick wall there. Instead of a brick wall, there is a rabbit hole, the famous rabbit hole. And as we fall down the rabbit hole, things just get stranger and stranger and stranger. As we all know, that's the whole idea of the rabbit hole. So reality is a rabbit hole. And if we look at it closely, as if we really actually were interested in it, really curious, then we'd fall down that rabbit hole. Then things would get very strange indeed. And after that, they'd even get even stranger. There'd be some weird shit going down for sure. Genuinely weird. But that doesn't happen with us. Obviously, it doesn't happen with us. How many people do you know that have fallen down rabbit holes and come back and say, wow, you wouldn't believe what just happened to me down this rabbit hole? People don't come back and say that because they don't fall down the rabbit holes. They don't fall down the rabbit holes because they don't examine the uncreated reality that carefully or at all. Instead, they're preoccupied with the dance of pixels. Now I know sometimes people do fall down the rabbit hole, and then when they come back and say, hey, guess what happened to me? We're going, whoa, we're suddenly aware that they've got some kind of mental aberration going on, that they're flipped out in some kind of a way. So we're very cautious, we're very wary of them. We'll say, sure, buddy, and we'll just walk away quickly because we don't want to know about any rabbit holes. And that is true it's got to be true for almost all of us. I mean, all the people you know at this moment, at this point in your life, you can think of each person. You can think of each person, and would they be interested in the prospect of a rabbit hole appearing and suddenly falling down it? Would they not be interested? Are there preoccupations other than that kind of thing? Are they preoccupied with normal stuff, known stuff, defined stuff, everyday stuff? And as we all know, there's very few people that would be fed up to the back teeth of the positive reality that we're supplied with, the designed world that we have been supplied with, and really want more out of life than that. And to say want more out of life than that, the better way of putting that would be just to say that we just want to live, because that is life. Life is the journey into the unknown, not the celebration of the known. But having said that, if it's the case that we do want to celebrate the known and shun the radical unknown, the unknown that we couldn't ever get our heads around, well, obviously that's fine. The journey's there if we want it, and if we don't want it, then we'll never know about it, and that's got to be fine. That's our freedom. We are free. We're free to embark upon the hero's journey, or we're equally free not to. We're absolutely free. But the only proviso there is that if we stick to the world of the known, the designed world, and celebrate the productions of thought endlessly, this creates or can create an overt type of malaise. And then the malaise becomes such that we are forced back on ourselves. We have to change, in other words, because on a very, very deep level, we're not happy with the life that we've made, or the life that's been made for us. So what I'm saying there really is what we call neurotic mental illness. Is when the world of the known becomes a torment, a total torment. And it always is a torment, but because we're living in this way that we're not really seeing things for what they are, we don't see it to be a torment. But when this magic shine goes off things, the magic shine that makes what is a sterile situation seem not sterile, actually seem fruitful, when the shine goes off, then we see things for what they are. And it's not an easy thing to look at, it's not a pleasant thing to look at. But the point here is that it's not that there's something wrong with us and that we need to be fixed. The point is that we're actually starting to see the truth, however unpalatable, however unwilling it might be, and we might say, but take it away, I don't want to see this truth. It still is the truth. and we still have to deal with it. And if we take it on board and don't deny this truth that we've learned, then that's where the possibility for transformation lies. The possibility for transformation, genuine transformation, that is entirely unrecognised by the mental health industries. Okay, thanks for watching.